Well, welcome everyone to our last session of the fall semester. It's so nice to see all of you here. Today we have my colleague Lori Brasile, who will be talking with all of you about how to better understand the job search experience for international students. Just a really quick snippet about Lori. I've known her for many years now, but for those of you who do not know her, she is the Assistant Director for Career Connections, serving as the program manager of our Career Treks program. She also focuses on connecting alumni opportunities and connecting them also with the University Career Center, because as some of you may know, alumni have our services for life. Additionally, Lori serves as the career coach for technology, data, and analytics, and is also a faculty and staff liaison to the College of Computing and Informatics. Working within that field of the Computing and Informatics College, she does work a lot with international students. And having over 2,000 international students here at UNC Charlotte, we see a lot of them throughout our services, and you are probably seeing them as well. So we're really excited to have Lori come and share her expertise with us today. And feel free to have your questions ready to go. We will go through this presentation and then open it up for a Q&A. So Lori, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Suzanne said, I'm Lori, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic with you. I've been at UNC Charlotte for a little over 5 years now, and since moving into my role at Charlotte, I have been primarily serving kind of technology and data students, and so naturally a lot of our international students tend to go into STEM fields. And so that's really where my kind of experience working with international students began. I've been in the field for almost 20 years now, but have been primarily working kind of with technology students for the last 5.5. And so I know Suzanne said that I was, kind of an expert, and I still kind of feel like I'm always learning something new about the international student experience and really how that impacts their job search in the United States. And so as you think about kind of what you know about the current job market and just the job search in general in the US, even for our domestic students, for our international students, they have to work twice as hard. And so I'm really passionate and interested about trying to help them as much as that we can. And I believe that it takes all of us for that to happen. So happy to answer questions, but we're going to kind of get right into what we're going to cover today. So our agenda is first just to let you know if you don't know. I know everybody kind of has probably varying levels of understanding about our international student community, but I wanted to just let you know who our international students are. Go over some terminology that is often associated within kind of career and jobs with respect to international students. And then just generally talk about some of the barriers that international students in particular have to navigate as they're going through that job search experience. We're going to cover kind of the business case for hiring international students, and then talk through some recommended job search strategies, campus resources, and really how you as a faculty member or as a staff member that may be working with international students, how you can support them in that journey. And so the International Student and Scholar Office has this data on their website, but this is our current enrollment for fall 2024, where our international students are coming from, the top fields of study. So we have almost 2,000 international students that are coming from over 90 countries, which I think is really amazing. I think one thing to note is that 76% of those international students are graduate students. So we often kind of are working more predominantly with our graduate students. They're a lot of times the ones that are taking advantage of our resources in our office. They're primarily F1 visa holders, and we'll talk about what F1 visa means in just a minute if you're not 100% sure. And then the top fields of study are going to be from computing and informatics, engineering, and business. But we do have international students that are in other programs of study, even liberal arts as well. But the top fields of study are going to be more along the STEM majors. And I think it's really interesting that Most of our international students come from India, which has been really cool for me, just to learn about more about the Indian culture and what it's like growing up over there, and kind of how students learn about career choice and career development and what that looks like. The other thing that I think is interesting to note is that we currently have over 1,300 alumni that are on F1 status extension, which are authorized to work in the US for up to 36 months. So that's going to be your students that are on OPT. And we'll talk a little bit more about what OPT means if you're not familiar with that verbiage. So getting right into the definitions, when we talk about ISSO, that's the International Student and Scholar Office. Many of you probably already know about their office. They are a wonderful campus partner. They really care about our international students. And so they're going to be the main point of contact for our international students, and maybe even for you if you have questions around work authorization and visa restrictions. But they provide information and services to help our international students and visiting scholars achieve their goals, whether those are personal goals or educational goals, and really help foster an appreciation for cultural diverse learning environment. And I think, in case you didn't know, this is International Education Week, and so part of the Office of International Programs, they kind of put on a whole week of events kind of encouraging international education. And so we often will include some of those programs that focus on the international student job experience. An F1 visa is the visa that allows our international students to enter into the US and study in an accredited college or university. Most of our international students are on F1 visa. We also have research scholars that are on J1 visas. But when we talk about kind of working and career, we're kind of focusing mainly on the F1 visa. And then OPT and STEM OPT. So OPT stands for Optional Practical Training. So this is the opportunity for a student to apply the knowledge that they've gained in their degree program to off-campus work that has to be specific to their field of study. So that's kind of one of the main caveats, is that it has to be directly related to what they're studying in the United States. So this is authorized by the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, or the USCIS, but the ISSO works with students to apply for OPT and to kind of help them get recommended for that. And so the maximum amount of time that an international student can be on F1 OPT status is 12 months per degree level. Plus, if they're in a STEM field, then they have an opportunity to extend that for an additional 24 months. And again, all this information is on the ISSO website. And then CPT, this stands for Curricular Practical Training. So we do work with ISSO to help process CPT applications. CPT allows a student to do more of off-campus training that is part of their curriculum. So this could look like an internship, for example, which is mostly how we work with students in that way. Or it could be something that is already built into the curriculum, where the training is a requirement of the course. And so the academic department may handle that. And then on our end, the training is going to be approved as an experiential learning opportunity. And then it's processed in conjunction with our office and ISSO. So CPT is more kind of internship, and then OPT is working after you've graduated for the most part in the United States. So the H-1B visa, this is the temporary visa category that allows employers to hire highly skilled workers into specialty occupations that require at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent. So when you might hear about international students talking about visa sponsorship and things like that, most times they're talking about the H-1B visa. So this is something that comes most likely after they've already completed their OPT. But again, the STEM field tends to be where most often that visa sponsorship happens. And a lot of times, if you are in kind of a graduate degree, so you're graduating with a master's degree or maybe a PhD, then that also can help with the chances of getting a sponsorship. So we're not going to go into the details about how that works because I'm not really an immigration attorney and I don't necessarily deal in that. But I think it's important to understand that if people are asking, if students are asking you, or talking to you about visa sponsorship and things of that nature, a lot of times they're referring to an H-1B visa. Okay, so I think it's important to understand some of the kind of unique barriers that our international student community may be facing, and part of this just has to do with kind of like some cultural differences because they're coming to the United States. A lot of times, students are coming from their home country for the first time, and they're stepping onto our campus, and so obviously there's going to be some time that gets used to kind of what things are like here in the US. But one of the things that I've noticed just in my experience working with international students is just the difference in how kind of career decision making happens. So, just like over here, a lot of times the way that we make decisions or US students may make decisions, sometimes there is that familial influence, but it's even more so prominent for a lot of our students that are coming from outside the United States. So there's not as much autonomy to making those decisions. A lot of times when international students are making their career decision, it's kind of in conjunction with the family. And so a lot of times they may be pushed to explore or go into stable fields like medicine, engineering, or computer science, that sort of thing. So because of that, there's not always a whole lot of exploration that goes into kind of making those choices. It's just kind of this is what they were told to do, and this is the path that they're on. And so when they come to the US and we start to have conversations about kind of what they want to do and kind of providing them with the autonomy to explore that, sometimes that can be just kind of like a disconnect because it's not something that they've naturally been exposed to. And even just in terms of how universities operate, especially my experience working with students that are grad students that are international students at the university level over there, a lot of them kind of have this like placement model of career where it's the universities that are placing students into different types of roles, and that's not necessarily the career services model in the United States. It's actually kind of an outdated paradigm of career services, like that placement model. So that also is kind of something that they have to get used to, just in terms of how that decision-making process goes. It's definitely a little bit different. I think the biggest thing that can be challenging for our international students is just the differences in networking customs. So as you know in the US, we're very much kind of an individualistic country. And so the idea of like promoting yourself is very highly encouraged in the US. So we talk about in the Career Center all the time, we're talking about selling yourself and focusing on what you did, like in a group project, and really honing in on your skill set and your strengths. So that is something that is very common in the US, but in some other cultures that actually is not promoted, and that could be seen as something that could be like seen as unprofessional. And so the idea of that self-promotion can feel really uncomfortable for some of our students, especially when they're coming from cultures that are really focused on the whole, like the group, so like collectivist cultures. So that's something that I think students have to work a little bit extra harder on, is trying to understand how they can really promote themselves, because that's not something that they've ever had to do before. So it can be uncomfortable to focus on themselves. There also can be a hesitancy to approach employers and practice small talk. So, just kind of small talk when you are at like an event and you're kind of waiting for things to start, or maybe you're in an interview setting and there's kind of that awkward time where you're maybe going to the individual's office and before you kind of get into the questions. And we have this small talk in the US, we're talking about the weather or sports or whatever is going on at that moment. And so that is something that can be uncomfortable, and there's not really an understanding of how to navigate that. And so we obviously can help them in that, but just understanding that communication can be uncomfortable for them. And then obviously there's going to be, some language barriers, especially when we think about, some students, if they're studying English in their home country, it may just be kind of like equivalent to us in the US when we study like a second language. So it's, it can be hard sometimes for, kind of processing all of that information like in a quick manner that might be important for you to do in an interview setting. So sometimes students get worried about mispronouncing words, processing, what they're hearing quickly enough, and then industry specific language. A lot of times some of that can be lost in translation or idioms, figures of speech. So that is something that could be a concern for our international students. Also, the fact that they don't necessarily have a large local network to tap into for referrals. So as you probably know, when it comes to the job search, the more you can kind of tap into your social capital, the more that you can network and connect, the easier you're going to have in terms of getting those referrals, understanding what opportunities might be available, having people kind of like, speak on your behalf, kind of going to bat for you. And so our international students don't necessarily have that. They may have, a couple of relatives that are already over in the US, or they might be the first one from their home to even leave their country. And so we can really help them in the Career Center and on campus with trying to facilitate some of those employer introductions and offer guidance and kind of how the US job search works. And then, of course, we have the visa restrictions. So with CPT and OPT, there's going to be some limitation to the type of internships and full-time employment that they can pursue simply because it has to be directly tied to their degree program. And this can have an impact on, one's self-confidence and the ability to network openly, because a lot of times there is this concern that if I disclose to an employer that I will eventually require sponsorship in the future, that automatically means that I'm going to get an automatic rejection. And so if you keep on getting rejected over and over again, and you're not necessarily sure why, that can obviously have an impact on your self-confidence, especially if you think it's because of your work authorization status. And so that can impact one's kind of confidence in going up to employers and having those conversations and really advocating for themselves. A lot of times, they have to be the ones to advocate about what their work authorization status means, because unfortunately, employers are not always up to date on those things and don't necessarily understand all of the nuances and maybe doing sponsorship. And so, the student then is kind of bearing that burden a little bit more. And then because of the limited timeline to OPT and STEM OPT and the H-1B process being super competitive, it just creates kind of another layer. So once somebody receives their OPT, they only have like 90 days to find employment. And so that is not a whole lot of time. I mean, that's about 3 months, but the job search can take anywhere from maybe 6 months or longer, again, depending on the field and kind of what the economy looks like and all these things. There's a lot that goes into that timing. And so that can cause a lot of undue stress with that. And then with the H-1B visa process, a lot of that is regulated by the government. It's a lottery system. You're not necessarily guaranteed. And again, these are things that kind of come down the road, but it's still something that, students are thinking about for future. So I wanted to share this information because, I think sometimes our international students can be looked at as a commodity, and really they're not. However, they are definitely providing a lot of benefit to the United States. So this is taken from NAFSA, which is basically the professional organization of international educators. And so international students that are studying in the U.S. are providing over $40 billion to our economy and supporting over 368,000 jobs. And so that means that the sectors of like higher education, accommodation, dining, retail, transportation, all of those things that are benefiting from somebody actually coming over here, studying and living, they're kind of benefiting from that. And so that's good news for us. And so in looking to specifically at North Carolina, if you're curious, again, this is from the NAFSA website. We can see for North Carolina specifically, it's over $800 million financial contribution supporting 8,000 jobs. And then, and that's with 23,000 students that are enrolled. And I believe this data is pretty recent. You can go on their website and find it in case you're curious. And so what are the benefits to companies for hiring international students? And just looking at kind of, leveraging the fact that somebody is an international student. Well, the thing about it is that when somebody is on OPT and STEM OPT, they actually don't need any sort of visa sponsorship. So OPT and STEM OPT actually allows an employer to take a chance on an international student for up to 3 years without filing any additional paperwork, because again, the ISSO is helping our students with applying for OPT and getting that work authorization. And I know plenty of domestic students that that don't stay at jobs for more than a year. And so I think this idea that, oh, I'm going to invest so much time and money into somebody, and then they might not be able to stay more than 3 years. Well, there's a lot that can get accomplished in 3 years. So, that's kind of a benefit because once the student gets employed, they're most likely going to stay at that organization because they don't want to lose their work authorization status. And then, of course, thinking about all of the varying perspectives and experience that help drive innovation for companies and revenue for companies. So if you're, hiring an international student, maybe they are from, let's say, India, somewhere in India, and the company has operations in India or is looking to expand in that particular part of the world, then that can be real benefit to the organization because they have somebody now internally that can maybe help with some of that strategy. So there's definitely a lot of benefit that employers can take advantage of when hiring our international students. So now we're going to kind of move into just ways that international students can kind of really leverage and take advantage of some of the resources that we kind of offer here at Charlotte. And so in terms of job search strategy, just helping students continue to be informed about visa rules for things like CPT, OPT, and the H-1B visas, the visa sponsorship process. ISSO is really great. Obviously, they have a lot of resources. They offer workshops. I know at one point they used to have those posted on their website, but they really are going to be kind of the best point of contact for students that have questions on work authorization and visa regulations. It's also important that students have a plan and have like multiple backup plans. And it's important for students to be proactive. And this is, obviously stuff that we recommend to all students, but even more so for international students because things can kind of change. I mean, I think that's kind of something that they're going to have to be comfortable with is just the uncertainty of what it means to be an international student in the U.S., especially if you want to stay in the U.S. and, and work after you graduate. But in addition to that, I think practicing self-care, sometimes having those conversations about what that looks like can be difficult because again, from a cultural perspective, that might not be something that is focused on especially mental health. So I know that in my experience, sometimes I've seen students that really embrace that, and then others that maybe that just seems kind of not something that they would probably focus on when they're thinking through kind of their job search strategy. But leveraging all the Career Center resources. So we're really, I think grateful and blessed to be able to offer all that we can. I think that we can do more. But students have access, obviously, to our career coaching. So we meet with students either one-on-one or through our drop-ins or our group coaching program, which are our career meetups. We also work with the Center for Graduate Life and Learning. They're also a really wonderful partner with us. And so we have kind of some international student specific workshops that we offer in collaboration with CGLL so that those students can take advantage of those opportunities. Those things are posted on the CGLL website. And so that's where they can find out that information. Connecting with employers at career fairs and events. So this is really, really important. We try to emphasize face-to-face interaction with employers, alumni, people that are coming to campus on behalf of their organization as a way to brand their company or to get in front of students to talk about, employment opportunities. And so we try to, not only drive students to those events, but also, provide them with opportunities to learn how to navigate those events as successfully as they can as an international student. And we'll talk a little bit later on about what some of those examples are. Every November, we've been we're offering an international student job search panel. So we actually just had ours this past Monday, which is such a great event because we invite alumni and students that have been successful in the U.S. job search to talk about their experience, to share inspiration with students. We also include an immigration attorney on that and a representative from ISSO, and Jill Huerta in CGLL also collaborates with us and has kind of moderated that panel the last few years for us. So that's an example of a really specific event that we have been offering for the last several years during International Education Week every November. We also have international student-specific job search tools on our website that I'm going to show you here in just a minute, kind of a screenshot of what that looks like. And not every student knows about that. So a lot of times we tell them in career coaching about those tools. But if you're ever working with a student and they just need resources, you can always refer them to our website for that. Okay. Building and engaging in a network. Again, this is another thing that is super important. And sometimes it can be, sometimes the approach from international students may not necessarily be the best. So a lot of times we have to kind of help students understand how to go about building a network. And again, the best thing that we can emphasize is all of the stuff that students have access to through the university, not only through the Career Center, but through your departments as well, through the different colleges and academic departments that you might represent. So connecting with people at Career Center events, department and campus events and meetups, and that could be in person or virtually. There's benefit in doing both as long as there's kind of like that face-to-face component. Joining a club or organization is a really great way to meet people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a club that's related to their major or career focus, even though there's a lot of those opportunities that exist. And that can be a great way to get to know people in the industry. It's a way that employers can connect with students. But even if it's something that is a passion of a student that has nothing to do with what they're studying, I think it's a really great way to connect with people because the more that you talk to people, it's kind of like this idea of happenstance. You never know what a conversation might bring because if you share kind of more about yourself and what you're kind of up to and involved in, there might be somebody that's receiving that information that can provide you with some information or insight that could potentially help you with your job search. So I think getting involved with organizations is important. Attending professional conferences or industry meetings, this is really, really key, I think, too, for some of our graduate students that may be doing like maybe research, getting plugged into these different types of conferences, especially if your department is able to offer any sort of funding for some of these things or scholarships. I get emails every year about the Career Center offering this type of support. And as much as I really wish that we did, it's just not something we are able to do at this moment. And so if that is something that you're able to do for students, even if it's just a couple, that can really go a long way, because obviously then those students can connect with industry leaders, people that are kind of coming together to network and to meet and to discuss, industry related topics. We also recommend scheduling career conversations with industry professionals, specifically Charlotte alumni, ideally maybe other alumni that were also international students, just because they can kind of understand the experience a little bit better than maybe somebody like me who didn't necessarily have that experience. So there is an alumni search tool on LinkedIn that we can show students how to find alumni and how to really go fishing for people that they want to genuinely make a connection with. And so we talk about how to, approach those conversations from kind of a career exploration point of view, as opposed to a lot of times it may be, hey, can you help me with my job search? Do you know if your company is hiring, that sort of thing? So sometimes there has to be that education about how to have those conversations. But those conversations can be really, really crucial in the student's ability to kind of understand, what does it look like to be a software engineer at XYZ company, maybe versus another company that's in a completely different industry. What are some of the things that that company might be looking for, like what's important to them, because the more that you can know about that stuff, the more you can kind of, sell yourself, if you will, and talk about the value that you can bring to that organization. And our alumni community is just amazing. I know that Suzanne mentioned that I'm the alumni engagement liaison for our office, but especially in our international student community or international alumni, like they want to give back. And so this can be just a really easy way to connect with somebody that had kind of that similar experience and get advice and insight and inspiration into how they were successful. And then I also recommend just getting to know faculty and students in the academic department, encouraging students to visit faculty office hours, ask questions about, their research, what they're interested in, that sort of thing, because a lot of our faculty are also connected with industry outside of the university sometimes. And so I know a lot of times opportunities for employment can kind of go through the academic college. And so getting to build that relationship with faculty and staff and other students in the department is important. Especially too, when it comes down the line for things like references or letters of recommendation, our students are going to need people that know who they are and can talk about, what they're good at. And so kind of building up that relationship and getting to know people within their department is really, really crucial. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of my tech data and analytics website. So the way that we're kind of arranged in our office, like our framework. If you didn't know, we call them career communities, but essentially they're kind of like industry clusters. So I work with our technology, data, and analytics career community. But it's really important in terms of job search strategy for our students to research companies that are open to hiring international talent. And so on my website in particular, I have a list of international student specific resources to kind of help them with figuring out like who are some of the companies that have recently hired students for H-1B sponsorship? What are some other platforms where I can go and get, job postings from employers that will hire somebody on OPT? What is the list of like the most recent companies that have hired students on OPT and STEM OPT? So we have some resources on our website. One resource that we actually partner with international programs on is called Going Global. So this is a resource for anybody that's interested, both are domestic students, so domestic students that are interested in maybe working abroad somewhere, interning abroad, but then also for our international students, there is a section for H-1B kind of resources and things like that. So that's something that we actually provide funding to offer to our students. So we try to drive students to that resource as well. Gaining experience is super important, as you probably know. And so internships are ideal, but understanding depending on like when students come in order to be in order to apply for CPT, a student has to have been enrolled in an academic program full time for at least a year, or I think it's 12 months. And so sometimes that timeline doesn't necessarily work out based on when they entered in as a student. The majority of internship recruitment is actually happening almost a year before students would actually start that internship. So sometimes internships aren't going to be an option, but a lot of times they can be. But research is a great way to gain experience. So connecting with like research assistantships or for undergraduate students, micro research through OUR. Volunteering can be a great way to get some experience. There are definitely organizations out there that might need volunteers that have a tech skill set, for example, or whatever skill set the international student has. Personal and course projects are huge. So this can be a great way for students to kind of leverage, at least in the classroom, what they're doing, whether that is a specific class or maybe they're working on dissertation research. We can kind of help them with figuring out like, how do you talk about that on your resume in a way that emphasizes your skills that you've built and the tools that you're using in your research. And then certainly on-campus employment can be an option. So international students can work on campus. They just have to go through, the process with ISSO in order to get that authorization. But that can be a great way for students to kind of build their resume. We also encourage interview preparation. So as I mentioned before, sometimes it can be difficult to self-promote in an interview and talk about oneself. And so this is a way that we can encourage students to practice doing that in kind of a safe space. So we definitely offer practice interviews. You probably already know that. We have an interview prep platform called Big Interview, which is really awesome. Students can practice answering questions through that platform. And then certainly if they just want to talk through kind of interview prep, students can meet with us in career coaching. And then it's always recommended to customize each job application. And sometimes this is something that, takes a lot of education for all students, but the more that they can customize the job application, the better. We are definitely a proponent of, leveraging things like ChatGPT ethically, of course, in order to kind of help expedite some of that process and understand, like, what is this job description looking for? Okay, based on my resume, how can I kind of like tweak that a little bit so that it is, more tailored towards that job posting, if you will. If students have an online portfolio, a website, a GitHub, which is something that tech students would have, that is huge. That is another way that students can brand themselves and they can, kind of talk about that stuff on their LinkedIn profile and that sort of thing. So encouraging students to think about, does it make sense to have a portfolio that you can display on your resume, on your LinkedIn, and those types of places that kind of act as your personal branding. In terms of leveraging LinkedIn, the biggest thing, I know there's a lot on here and I'm keeping track of time. I want to make sure I get to some of your questions. But in terms of leveraging LinkedIn, having an active presence online is really, really important. So that means not just having an updated LinkedIn profile, but posting, following companies, start to share your voice on LinkedIn. So posting about industry related topics. That could be like I attended a conference and this is what I learned, or I read this article and I wanted to share it with my network. So making sure that you're being active. One of our alumni from Monday said that he works for Cisco. He's like a software engineer for Cisco. And the way that he got hired was he was posting on LinkedIn, sharing information on his LinkedIn, and Cisco noticed him. And Cisco reached out to him directly through LinkedIn and say, hey, we have this role. Do you want to apply? And then kind of the rest is history. So that's like a really cool example of how being active on LinkedIn can certainly impact your job search in a positive way. So following companies of interest on LinkedIn, following thought leaders, people that are talking about what you're interested in your industry. So if you're interested in electrical engineering, talking about, following people that talk about that. If you're interested in AI, follow people that talk about, AI and that sort of thing. And of course, LinkedIn has groups that you can join. Again, you can connect with Charlotte alumni through the search tool and stay updated on industry news. And if students have questions about any of this, then they can, work with us on these things. That's why we're here. Okay, so these are just some of the things that we offer in terms of campus resources and partnerships. A lot of these I already kind of talked about in terms of career coaching, our career community websites, our events and fairs. Hire a Niner. So again, that's I haven't really mentioned that, but that is the platform that students can use to find job postings from employers that want to hire our students. There is kind of a work authorization filter that our students can use to see the employers that said, yes, I'm open to hiring an F1 student. And then CPT authorization in partnership with the ISSO. So if a student finds an internship, they're an international student, they qualify for that, then we basically will work with the ISSO on processing that paperwork. And so once we process what we need on our end, then ISSO can process what they need on their end. And then that provides the work authorization for that student to complete the internship. We also have a cool resource that we partner with this vendor called Parker Dewey to provide micro internships that are completely virtual and paid. And so international students can definitely apply to these. They would just have to do the CPT authorization if they were to get hired into these micro internships. So that's kind of something that is a little outside of the traditional internship. It's more of kind of like maybe a project, something that might take anywhere from like 10 to 40 hours. So 40 hours in completion for that internship. I already mentioned kind of our interview prep program, our international student job search panel. We have a Career Center study abroad in London. Actually, this is something that Suzanne started, but I know that Suzanne has worked with CCI specifically, I believe, the graduate students to allow for some of our CCI graduate students to participate in that. And so obviously, if you have questions about that, Suzanne can answer those, but that can be an opportunity to explore kind of, what careers look like from like a global perspective, and then specifically looking at London. So I know we meet with employers when we're over there. And it's a really cool experience. We also offer a personal career branding class that Suzanne also teaches. And we've had international students take advantage of this before. So if somebody is able to do like an elective, it's a graduate level class, and they want like maybe some one-on-one, extensive career branding experience, then that can be a great class as well. And then obviously our partnership with ISSO, CGLL, our academic colleges and schools are really important. One of the things that we're going to be doing that's kind of new in the spring is working with CCI and School of Data Science, particularly the staff that are kind of in charge of professional development for those colleges. We're going to hopefully bring a international student panel, an alumni panel, up to the DuBois Center in the spring. So those types of things are kind of going on around campus, and it's just kind of a matter of helping to get the word out about that. In addition to that, we partner or this year we did something new during International Education Week. We offered kind of an international education meetup series, and some of that programming focused on study abroad, and then the rest of it focused on international student specific meetups. So networking for international students, job search strategies, that sort of thing. So we do offer some international student specific programming outside of kind of what we have with the CGLL, and hopefully we can kind of increase that. In the spring, we're going to be doing a career fair crash course for international students. That's something that I'm going to lead, that I wanted to offer, just because even the career fair experience for international students is definitely different than our domestic students. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information, and I want to talk about really briefly how you can help no matter what role you're in. I know everybody is working with students kind of on different levels and in different spaces. But again, if you are working with an international student and they are expressing questions or concerns about work authorization and visa regulations, ISSO is going to be their go-to. They have walk-in advising and that sort of thing. So they're going to be a great resource for that. Definitely refer students to us for relevant career development programming. Also CGLL for graduate student programming and international student career development programming that we collaborate with them on. Encourage and help facilitate networking opportunities. So again, if you are connected to people within the industry that your student might be interested in, facilitate those introductions if you're able to do that. I think that is wonderful. Offer mentorship or guidance on the U.S. workplace culture. So just based on your experience, like share that information with them. If you're having conversations about what that looks like, if they're nervous or concerned, feel free to share your own experiences, and that can kind of help with maybe breaking down some barriers or some misunderstanding or uncertainty around what that looks like. And then help connect students to relevant internship and research projects or assistantships or on-campus roles, anything that you might be involved in your role or your department. So if you're in a department, you offer research assistantships, or you hire in on-campus roles, that could be a great way to involve our international students to help them build that resume capital. Promote student engagement in professional associations, local industry groups, or conferences. Already talked about that, but anytime you can kind of share that information, whether it's a virtual event or in person, I think that's great. Being able to serve as a reference. So this kind of goes back to my point about encouraging students to build relationships with their faculty and staff, because as a career coach, I can't really serve as a reference for a student unless they actually worked for me. And so, because I don't have that relationship with them. But if you've had somebody in a class or they've reported to you in a role, you can you have that better understanding. So if you're able to do that, that really can go a long way in terms of kind of supporting that student. And I think just overall, having some empathy and compassion and being a listening ear is really important, helping connect students to their resources and being there for them, because this is, it is a hard thing to kind of go through. Like I said, they have to work twice as hard as our domestic students in terms of being successful in this job search. And so There's going to be a lot of imposter syndrome. There's going to be a lot of just like stress and not really and nervousness about whether or not they're going to be able to find a job and everything that kind of comes with the getting auto rejected and that sort of thing. So just kind of being there and showing empathy, I think is really important, and just helping connect them to whatever resources they need. And most likely that's probably going to be us in the Career Center, but it might be a different resource that can kind of help whatever it is that they might be going through. So some good news, UNC Charlotte actually ranks very high for career outcomes for our international students in terms of return on investment. And you may have seen this. I think this article might have been included in a Niner Insider recently, but according to this 2024 F1 Higher Career Outcome University ranking back in October, it's considering things like average salary, the ratio of salary tuition, the ratio of the total number of international students to the total number of permanent residency applicants, and then the total number of student permanent labor certification applicants. And so Charlotte ranks 27 out of 275 ranked universities, and then number one among universities in the Carolinas. So that's definitely something to be proud about. But like I said, I feel like we could do more. And I think a lot of us in the Career Center want to do as much as that we can to support our international students. So with that, I did create a training guide. If you are interested, you can scan this QR code. It's basically going to kind of give you an abbreviated version of this slide deck. And then also there is a PDF version that I believe Suzanne included on our faculty staff part of our website that you can access. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and look in the chat.